It's here, the penultimate session of Hybrid Events Ignites. Have we saved the best till last? Only time is going to tell. It gives me great pleasure to literally take my shoes off and hand over to New York City and Naomi to intro, welcome, and interview our next guest. Naomi, I'll join you with the Glisser questions. Over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. Hope you get comfortable over there, and we'll see you for those questions. I'm really excited for this next panel. You know, I think as we've talked today, we've really all been stuck in this ongoing set of evolutionary questions that we're dealing with as we're thinking about events. And our guests today are going to help us understand how they are evolving their thinking and strategy when it comes to hybrid experiences, or simply experiences, as we look towards the close of 2021 and into 2022. You know, I think if pivot was the most overused word in 2020. I'd like to actually encourage us all to think about pirouetting instead of pivoting. So we're going to continue that conversation around evolving strategy. So today we're going to hear from Kate O'Connell, who is Associate Director, Global Strategic Events and Experiences from EY. We're also hearing from Jill Leithner, who is Director, Executive Event Productions at Intel Corporation, and Karen Galatis, former Senior Director, Corporate Event Marketing at Oracle. So I can't wait to hear from you all, ladies, about how you're evolving your thinking when it comes to experiences. Good morning. How are you all?
Good morning.
I wonder, hi. So I think what I'm going to do is ask each of you, because we all kind of come at these large events from a slightly different angle, right? And we help to drive the delivery from a different perspective. So what I'm hoping we can do is just start off one by one by giving an overview of the kind of angle and the perspective that you take when you're thinking about experiences, and how your thinking has evolved as a result of the pandemic when you're considering your event portfolio. So for this, I'm going to pop right over to London. Hello, Kate. We'll start with you.
Hi,
from
thank
EY.
you.
Tell us a little bit about that consideration
Sure.
for you.
So within EY, I sit in the brand marketing and communications team. So really, probably within brand marketing and communications, we've had the most change out of everybody over the last 12 months. And really, I think it's been about that experience. And I think the last session touched on this really well. There's no one size fits all. You know, the events range from CEO roundtables that we do through to global online award shows. And some of them really do lend themselves really well to the online experience. And some of them, you know, we've found it challenging to convert the in-person, you know, really sort of niche conversations where you want to have those people in the room. It's difficult to recreate. So I think we've had really great experiences of, you know, trials and tribulations, as I think probably everybody has over the last few months, but excited now to sort of look again to what does the next stage look like. So I think probably the big topic was pre-record versus live, and we spent a lot of time sort of debating that. And now I think sort of people are asking, okay, well, you know, where's the hybrid events deck? Can you send me the how-to on hybrid events? And obviously, I think we know it's not quite that simple. If it was, maybe we wouldn't all be employed, so that's possibly a good thing. But definitely just looking at how that experience ranges from the different scope of events.
That's interesting. So kind of just thinking about those dials of the experience component and how those tune up or tune down, depending on the need. Jill, hello, good morning. How are you?
Good.
Hello.
Good.
So whereabouts are you joining us from today, Jill? Where in America are you joining virtually from?
I am coming to you live from Portland, Oregon. So,
so
yeah, and I'm
it's
very
definitely
happy.
still morning for you.
It is.
That's
good morning and good afternoon.
So tell us a little bit, Jill, about your perspective on the events and experiences that you create, and how your perspective has been shifting over the past year.
Yes. Well, I lead an organization that is responsible for creating executive event experiences for Intel's C-level and top executives across both internal and external audiences. So wherever our executives are speaking or making addresses or we're creating moments, around our company or what things where we're launching or things along those lines. Our team is really the glue that is consistent in terms of driving from strategy to execution, and from a production perspective. So, it's a combination of intense detail program management and coordination across all the stakeholders, as well as we have an in-house creative team that is working closely with telling that story visually, as well as we manage a couple of studios and an affiliate studios where we run and manage both live broadcasting as well as pre-recorded events. So our perspective, or my perspective, and what's shifting with the pandemic has been, it's evolving. It's been a wonderful time to be in this position in leading productions. We've been extremely busy, but there's also a lot of change. And a lot of that change is in terms of how we bring things to life and how we produce them and how we think about the content that is coming and again, the experiences that we're trying to create. And so for me, there's a little bit of certainly agree across probably all the conversations that's been happening across the conference so far. But for me, it really is around this concept of time and what that means as far as, the time and the ramp to produce, to prep and produce and then rehearse and get everything, and think mindfully about what we're bringing to the audience and respecting the time of the audience and their time and bringing value to them. And so that has been, an evolution of where we were from the very beginning, and really just, I know it's not, what did you say, pirouetting, as we were pirouetting when everything shifted. It was definitely about, trying to understand across that portfolio, what should go virtual versus are there other channels, other ways of bringing that content out to the audience, and then looking at that holistically, from the exec side and the thought leader and tech leadership side. We still have a very consistent cadence as far as quality, not quantity, but it's now how we want to reach folks, and then I think that's been a balance, especially as we go into events that are hybrid. And so that's just a little bit of where I'm coming from. But
Wow. So really kind of thinking about how we want to reach folks, which I think is actually a key quote that we'll keep coming back to. Who are we reaching and how do we engage with them? Because those are the needs that are evolving, right? That we're responding to. Karen, have you seen a lot of that in your work? Good morning to you, Karen. It's nice to see you today. Tell us a little bit about how you've been evolving your
Sure. So I think when I asked about overall, responsibility and what we've been doing over the last few years, it's twofold, and it's obviously life before the pandemic and life during the pandemic. And when I think about what my organization was before the pandemic, we were predominantly responsible for event operations for all of the global corporate events that we put on, and that could be anywhere from 1,000 to 20 or 30,000 conference attendees over multiple days. So it was really trying to make it as easy as possible for those attendees, for our suppliers, for everyone. And once the pandemic set in, then it was sort of refocusing, as everybody else here has done, but it was starting to look at not only keeping the lights on, as I used to say, with the back end of the virtual events, making sure from an operational perspective or registration or content delivery that you were doing what you needed to do to actually execute a highly high quality virtual event. But it was also looking at the attendee experience. And it was also looking at event technology. And one of the areas that I was responsible for was actually trying to determine what that next event technology stack would look like. Because coming out of the pandemic and trying to then use all of your knowledge that you've gained in these past 18 months over virtual and digital events, but how do you bring that to a hybrid event? And what do you do with your in-person audience? And so it was really key for us to do two things. One was to know what the platform should be and know what the application should be for the online audiences, but also for in person. And it was also to try to get closer to the customer and really understand the attendee experience, whether they were online or whether they were in person, because it's really rip up your old event strategy and start from scratch. That's where we all have to be. So that's sort of, before COVID, yes, responsibilities were one thing, but I think over the last 15 to 18 months, all of us here have seen our responsibilities change or shift. And that's where I saw it shifting to.
Oh, that's so interesting. And I think you're touching on the idea of attendee experience, right? And kind of stepping through those journeys. And for you, it sounds like kind of beginning with pathway, and that pathway to the event will help inform some of the tech stack that you then craft to meet that need. Kate, I'm curious about your approach to attendee experience. Is it similar process there, or do you take a different perspective or angle as you think about that?
No, I'd agree and say sort of fairly similar. I think the thing as well is we've really been trying to think about, do the in-person and virtual or online experience, do they and can they be the same? And I think that's one thing we've been sort of discussing, in that I personally don't think they can, but I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. I think it will lend itself to, depending on location and budget and time zone and all sorts of different factors, as to whether, sometimes the in-person is sort of what the client or the customer sort of really needs from that particular engagement, or if it's more suited to the online. And I think we don't have to sort of say, that you can deliver the same in-room experience to the virtual experience. And I'd say probably even with this event here today, the thing I was most excited about was actually seeing real people and meeting some of the team that from Glisser that I've worked with for the last sort of year and a half, but haven't actually met them in person. And I think those are sort of things that for particular events, you can't replicate in the same way online, but that doesn't need to mean that, one experience is sort of better or sort of less optimum. So I think that's one thing that we need to think about from the content from the outset, rather than sort of, going back to, what's the date, what's the venue. It's really what's the experience and designing and building it all around that.
And allowing room, it sounds like, for that kind of personalization for your audience members to really kind of craft the experience that makes sense for them. Jill, I'm curious from your perspective. Huge shifts in terms of the past year or so. Now we're looking towards 18 months, and then as we look ahead, has this impacted the way that you're structuring your team and the different roles and how that kind of is shaping up for you?
Well, yes, I think again we are a dedicated support team organization within Global Comms at Intel to support our executives in all the motions and movements as far as where we want to reach our various audiences, whether it's press, analyst, investor, employee, industry, partner. So I think from a structure and a perspective, the team is definitely, we'll always ask for headcount and we'll need more headcount, but that's, that's part of our scale model. I think that's the biggest part, because there's a lot that's happening, both, especially with going and being live in person. And we were very much about creating that experience in the room, post-COVID, and all that content that comes to stage. And then we always feel like there was a virtual component and an outreach online, but I think it's a much more mindful production, greater production value in terms of how we're thinking about the online or the virtual audience actually consuming that content. And so that creates workflows and work streams that are just, like literally double. And while it may be double, I keep saying one of my key things in the reality of where we are and where we're going is everything is integrated. Everything is just completely integrated across the marketing funnel, the marketing organization, the comms organization, and it's a tremendous amount of collaboration. And so what we're doing team-wise is, like thinking about our workflows just collaboratively and breaking down the silos across organizations to work and understand what that holistic experience really is going to be. And I know we've talked a lot about journeys, and everybody has been planning, what is their virtual journey, and we've all did the playbooks, as was mentioned before. And part of the initial success was, finding a platform and having a low stress experience and making it really easy for people to access and consume. Then it was, adding a little bit of surprise and delight and some entertainment value, and we keep coming back to it's about the content. And I'm glad that Kate had said that earlier. It's for me, content is king, and then how are we really crafting that whole experience? Through the talents and the skills of both of social, paid, our product, our marketing, just getting all those messages integrated and then coming together. And that's a tremendous lift and a real value add from a resource perspective. But there is a lot of behavior change going on there. And I think I say several, to folks, it's like the Jeffrey Moore Crossing the Chasm book from years and years ago is coming to life in terms of events and in terms of all this technology and all this social, these platforms and such. They made sense in their own right, but this pandemic and COVID and post-COVID is illuminated the purpose and how these things can come together and how we can program, and that we have that mentality of programming, 360 programming of content. And so thinking and broadening ourselves out beyond event as just a moment in time, but thinking about it as an experience over time. And that pokes on a few things, that brings to life some things that as marketers, lifelong marketers, we've incorporated. And, there was relationship marketing, one-to-one marketing, integrated marketing, campaign marketing, all these things that lead up to, and here we are. I mean, this is the culmination of how we bring events together out to these audiences, both making it anytime, any place, almost that omni-channel kind of mentality like you would have in retail. It's not just in person. You want to go, you go in the store, you shop online, you shop on your phone. Now events is drifting and having that same footprint, right? It's how these audiences are going to consume it, and then how do we tailor that content for those platforms. But also at the end of the day, for me, especially with executives, it's about telling that compelling story, and that content is always going to be your best engagement vehicle. Always, the content is always going to be the best way to add value to the people showing up, because you're delivering something that they need to hear or they want to hear, or it's something that's going to help them do their jobs. And I think that that's really where we are right now. And the organization just is just pivoting to scale to that. And we're putting a lot more into our, just our broadcasting live capabilities, just to keep that live component as well. Pre-recorded's nice, but live is what events are all about. So that's where we're pushing.
So interesting. It's really interesting to hear you think about the narrative perspective on communications, right? And how that is woven in, not just in kind of one moment in time, but across time, across communication channels. And it becomes a very kind of holistic and thoughtful and detailed exercise. Karen, I'm over to you with a quick question here. Jill had just talked about the illuminating effect of COVID, right? Where it gets, we've been forced to think differently and to kind of bring to light more opportunities for us. For you, Karen, as you think about the industry coming out of this COVID experience, what has been one of the positive impacts? What would you see as something that we can all carry forward?
Well, I think that we had a great opportunity to get more in touch with our audiences. And I think this is what we've learned over the last year or so is trying to find more ways to deliver smaller bites of content and trying to understand more about the targeted audiences that we want to engage with, and how do we want to engage with them, and what kind of experiences do they want. I think that at some point before the pandemic set in, there were a lot of very large conferences or a lot of in-person events, but I think people were doing a lot of that, saying rinse and repeat. They just kept doing the same conferences over and over again and saying that they were targeting a certain set of audience or attendees. But I think we really had to kind of roll up our sleeves this last year and kind of figure out what is it that our audience really wants. And if I only have an hour with them online, then how do I deliver the content that is really, really important? And how do I keep them engaged? And it's not just engaged that day, but how do I keep them coming back? It's like wanting more, more, more. And I know sometimes with high tech content and other content, it's not the same as going back and watching the same TV show or something like that. But there's still an opportunity to continue to engage with folks, whether it's on demand, whether it is bringing them back once a quarter for a webinar or some sort of virtual event. And I think that we've learned a lot from that targeting, and really understanding that it doesn't need to be you don't need to have a 20, 30,000 person conference, or you don't even need to have a 5,000 person conference, that you can do things differently and you can do them better. And you can also get closer to the customer by maybe doing, road tours or things like that, and having 500 people at a hotel, or 50 people as you have in New York and London. But it's really getting closer to the customer and truly understanding what the target is. But I think if we back up a lot on what Jill and Kate were also saying, is that it also means that you as an organization, marketing organization or event organization, the very first thing you need to decide is, what is your objective? Are you building the event for an online audience or an in-person audience? And when we call it hybrid, it's only hybrid to us as event planners and suppliers. It is not a hybrid event to a viewer or an audience or an attendee. They're either in person or they're online. So
Speaking
it's really
of which,
truly...
Karen, I've got a ton of questions from our audience, and I have 4 minutes to ask you them. So yeah, we're talking about that. We could be talking all day with you ladies. It's a fascinating conversation. Sorry to interject. I am going to do some short fire questions, Naomi, if you will allow me. I need very short answers from you all, starting with you, Kate. What challenge is keeping you awake at night? Give me a short answer. What is it? What's your nightmare?
How do we keep innovating? I think how do we keep improving? Because people always want to better themselves. So I think, the last 6 months we've set the bar sort of so high. How do we keep continually raising that bar? What are the new sort of innovations? How do we keep delivering the content sort of on point and sort of standing out?
That is a perfect link into my next question. I'm going to take this to Karen. What are we missing? Kate just said we are, the thing that's keeping her awake at night is the innovation. What's the experiences that we're missing entirely at the moment, Karen?
We need to do more of these. It's a hybrid approach. We don't know if this is going to work or not. We need to take risks, and we need to have people out there on the front line that are willing to do more and more of these hybrid type events, and to be able to determine some best practices and learnings from all of this. It's hard to determine how to engage your audience if you have never done it before.
That is a beautifully concise answer. I am going to bat my next question to you, Jill. Have you made changes as an organization to your event team structure to deliver this new, and I'm not going to say hybrid strategy, I'm going to say new event strategy? Are we needing to talk different talents? And I think I'll see some nods from both Karen and from Kate as well. Jill?
Yeah. Interestingly enough, we went through a huge event transformation organizationally before pandemic, and that was just lifting up. And then it was a little bit of arrested development when pandemic happened, and then of course the pirouetting. But I would say skill-wise, absolutely, we are, just looking at, how, as Karen just said, we do more hybrid, we learn, we adjust, and we have to fine tune where we think we're going to lean in and need certain skill sets sets. And for me, I brought in just recently some key talent like that has a lot more of that broadcasting experience that I mentioned. And I think we're just continually working across, how we build that cross. I like the mentality of it's like there's a lot of talent out there, and now everything from an event perspective, it's just all it's all integrated, and we're all in the same car going to the beach together, not in separate cars.
I love this, but we don't want to go to the beach if we're doing some great virtual content, because we learned that from our last session by Tara, right? Finally, my last question before we say a great big thank you to everybody. Here in the United Kingdom, they're calling it Freedom Day, which is Monday, the 19th of July. We have a question from Chetan Shah. Thank you, Chetan, from MySbook. Do you see, and I'm going to start with you from London, this is going to be a yes/no for all three of you, and maybe even Naomi. Do you see any correlation with return to offices to return to live? Kate?
Absolutely, yes. I think we're really looking forward to people coming back into the office, to having more experiences like this today where you can have that FaceTime with people. So I think the more people are back into the office, the more the events will start to trickle in again.
So that was a very long absolutely yes.
Yes, no, maybe.
Jill, yes or no? Return to offices is meaning return to live.
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's connected. I mean, I think it's important, but I mean, if you see what's happening now with concerts and whatnot, people are going to want live, and I think that'll happen, and I think the models will grow. So yeah, not a short answer, but I think it's important. But,
Thank you, Jill. Karen?
Maybe.
Oh, I love that. She's given us a maybe. And I'm going to put that question to you, Naomi, before I close out the session, because you've been our great host. What are your thoughts?
I believe that there is a correlation, but I also think that we've understood now how to connect more with our kind of global colleagues. That's going to, people will want to maintain those connections as well. So, yes, but.
Great closeout, great political closeout there. Thank you, Naomi. Thank you to all our panelists and our expert moderator. A big round of applause for them all. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Jill. And thank you, Naomi. Thank you so much. Next up is our final session of Hybrid Events Ignited. Oh, mixed results on that. So we're going, yes, it's nearly bar time. But we've got one quick poll question for those of you in the audiences, which is from the team. They just wanted to have a quick check-in, just in case you've joined us recently. It's our next poll. If we can move to our next one, please. Which is a quick question from Glissa. If you could just quickly answer that, that would be amazing. We aren't going to have a proper break for you in-person audiences, as much as I know you like leaving the room and talking. We are going to do a quick turnaround so you can stand up. If you do need to go and leave the room, grab a drink, come straight back. We are literally going to be starting our final session in about 1.5 minutes. So that's for everybody here. We'll see you in 1.5 minutes. Be back in the room. Thank you.